Yeah, so I'm Kristy, I'm 23, and I'm studying my Master's of Public Health at Simon Fraser University. My brother was diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was 16, and at the time there was a lot of confusion about what causes schizophrenia, and my brother did use cannabis before he was diagnosed, and so there's a lot of fear that that was the cause of his schizophrenia. And what I've come to learn through many years of school and lived experience as well is that it's not like that. And while it can trigger schizophrenia happening sooner, it was probably going to happen anyways. So I think a lot of family members and friends have this big fear that cannabis causes psychosis and schizophrenia, and there is a link, and we need to be aware of that, but there doesn't need to be this huge fear around schizophrenia happening from using cannabis a few times, but you do need to be aware of your own personal susceptibility. I think now that cannabis is legalized, a lot more people are open to trying it because they assume legalization means it's safe. But there's still so much we don't know about cannabis and links to schizophrenia and psychosis. And so I think the most important thing is that people try and be aware of their own personal risk and make informed decisions in that sense, and not basing it off of fear and what they might hear from the media or others that there is this defined causal link between cannabis and psychosis. It's not there for everyone. And it really is a personal link that you need to explore for yourself. I would tell them to, one, try and look at why they're using cannabis, if they're using it to cope with something, whether that be a mental illness, stress, that sort of thing. Drugs inherently are not good or bad, but it's about why you're using them, where you're using them, how frequent, that sort of thing, where you're getting your drugs from. There's a lot of different factors that play into the conversation, and so assessing for yourself and reflecting on why you're using drugs in the first place, it might work for you. Maybe, I don't know, it's very personal, right? So thinking about why you're using it and safety factors, such as maybe not going with such a high THC weed, maybe balancing a little bit more with CBD, maybe not using when you have commitments the next day, and that sort of thing. So just being aware and trying to mitigate your own personal risk. Ask questions and seek out resources. Look for balanced resources. Don't just look in one place or another. Really try and look for more balanced conversation. Again, drugs are not inherently good or bad. So trying to find out information from sources that are reliable and, like anecdotal experience, it's very personal from one person to the next, and so that may be a good fit for that person, but it might not be a good fit for you. So thinking about your own susceptibility to psychosis or schizophrenia or that whole range of mental illnesses, and just trying to be as safe as possible if you can. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use cannabis. Maybe it's not a bad thing for you, but trying to mitigate harms in the ways we already talked about, like less THC. Maybe it's a different method of using cannabis. Maybe instead of smoking, you do edibles or something like that. Like, there's a lot to consider, and it can be overwhelming, but trying to find trusted resources to get factual information from is really important. I think it's just important to try and be aware of your own risk factors, and just everyone's experience is going to be different. Even if you have a family history, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same for you as it might be for your sibling. So being aware of your own personal risk factors and taking that into account to make an informed decision is really important. People are scared of what psychosis looks like when they see it. There's a lot of fear. A lot of it is perpetuated by how we talk about people who have experienced psychosis. And, people with schizophrenia and psychosis are way more likely to experience violence than to commit violence on other people. But that's not the side we hear about in the media. We hear about the worst of the worst. We hear about the rarities. And so psychosis and someone experiencing psychosis isn't necessarily someone to be feared. It's someone who's probably really in need of some help. And because a lot of us don't know how to talk to someone who's experiencing psychosis or schizophrenia, or even we don't even understand what that is, it can be very challenging to try and relate to someone who's in that state.